You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the old Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond just the world of derivatives and peer abroad into the world of all things crypto. Talk some of the spot, also the options and the futures, get into a lot of the volume, the volatility, the open interest, the hot trades, unusual activity, all of that good stuff. My name is Mark Longo from the aforementioned network, as well as, of course, from theoptionsinsider.com. Still pleased to see the influx of new people hitting this show all the time. Many of you coming from the crypto world, maybe not so much from the options world. We'd love to see you folks there. Of course, we have a whole network of shows for you guys to sink your teeth into outside of the Crypto Rundown every Monday. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you head on over and subscribe to the full network feed. You get content pretty much every day on that feed, sometimes more than once a day out there. So you got podcasts hitting you pretty much day in, day out, live streams like this one and a whole bunch more. And, of course, if you like what you hear, keep those reviews coming. We love to see the new folks continue to discover this program. And, of course, the reviews help make that possible. And, of course, keep those questions coming, too. We do love to hear from you guys. We got another great guest lined up for the Crypto Hot Seat. So, without further ado, let's roll out the chair.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the program where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto, derivatives, and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And next up is a newcomer to this program, even though he has been on the network in the past. He is Ian Greaves, the managing director and indeed the head of product over there at ErisX. Ian, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Hey, how you doing, Mark? Thanks for having me on. Hopefully you can hear me.
Oh, yes, you sound good, coming through loud and clear. It's been a couple of years since you joined us. We had Matt, your chief strategy officer, on this program back in actually about over a year ago, May of last year. So it's been some time since we've had ErisX on the program. And your previous appearance before that was all the way back in the dark days of November 2018. Who can even remember that long, Ian? It seems like a lifetime ago, does it not?
I was going to say, what with kind of crypto never sleeps, time flies by even so. So, here we are. Yeah, 2 years later almost. It's crazy.
And the tumultuous events of the last few months really putting that acceleration into stark perspective. Obviously, we have a lot of new listeners to this program. Why don't you go ahead and give them a little bit of an overview of your background in the financial, indeed derivative space, Ian, as well as a real quick overview of what you guys do at ErisX.
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best to keep it short. So I started out as an options trader back in the early 90s in London, worked for a few banks, and then went out on my own as a local trader. Trading. I was trading index options at the time, to be honest. So very different to any of the different, so many different instruments you can trade. But I was an index trader in the FTSE index. But as some may know, the electronic markets, especially in London, came around much quicker than the onset of removing the floors and moving to electronic as they have over here. So early 2000, I moved much more into technology kind of based roles, helping some technology groups in London build some automated algorithmic tools to execute on global markets. And then from there, staying in technology, whether it be, as I said, algorithmic execution, basis trading. And then before I joined ErisX, I was actually with a kind of global connectivity normalization platform for, people to access the markets. But I joined Eris in early 2018. I'd had the crypto bug for a while, but hadn't found really where I should place my interest. And luckily, Eris were just about to go off on their kind of just starting their venture into crypto, so I was able to join them. And really, as Eris, we set up the business coming out of a previously fully regulated that's CFTC regulated futures business, which was interest rate swap futures, and wanted to build a platform of much more along the lines of, I would say, traditional capital markets, an exchange, a clearinghouse, modeling along the kind of futures industry, but with the added benefit of having spot on the platform as well. So we launched spot in April 2019. We launched futures, that'd be Bitcoin futures, at the end of last year. And then just a month ago or so now, we launched Ether futures, which has been pretty exciting. But I would say one more key thing about our business is that we really wanted to focus on the intermediary on-ramp into crypto. Obviously all these different venues around the world have done a great job of, acquiring, individuals, direct members. And with that, most of them done a pretty good job. But, the intermediaries that, would be household names to most people, like TD Ameritrade and Fidelity, those guys want to get into digital assets as well. And so we wanted to make sure that we built an on-ramp for them with capital market workflows that they would understand and trust and could kind of plumb into their architecture pretty easily, basically. So hopefully that's given you a bit of color.
A lot to unpack there. You mentioned, the race to the floors and back again. Obviously, you're right. It happened at a much more accelerated pace across the pond there than it did here. Here, it took a pandemic to pretty much take the floors away. In fact, as we speak right now, we were just talking in one of our other programs this morning, they are starting to drift back here. The CBOE just reopened their SPX and VIX pits just this morning again. So we are seeing the pits still cling to life here, ever so tenaciously here in the U.S., but at a limited capacity. CME going to bring theirs back. Just focus on the Eurodollars for now, back next month. So still some pit life here, and perhaps that will translate into more paper down the road. You mentioned you kind of got lured to the dark side of crypto there from traditional finance. Ian, I always like to pester people about what it was that brought them over. What was that inflection point that made you say, these crypto things are interesting? For some folks, it was just watching the price action back in, the heady days of 2017. Others, it was before then. They were intrigued by the technology front. Some others had all sorts of interesting origin stories. What was it that brought you to the dark side of crypto, Ian?
Yeah, funnily enough, at like 2013, my brother and I ended up kind of talking about it. I'd seen some information, but I hadn't really dug into it. He mentioned it, and he actually owns a bar where he ended up putting in a terminal to accept Bitcoin for payment for beers. So I can't say that was very successful, but he had a couple of enterprising kind of people come in and pay for their beers with it. But for me, it was more like, oh wow, yeah, let me look at this and, hey, this is kind of bringing markets to people. I mean, yeah, democratizing finance and, and that kind of thing as well. But for me, it was much more like, hey, there's this whole ecosystem where I can, write some basic algos, get on the internet, open an account, and, I can just play around with trading. Unfortunately, I didn't just buy a bunch and sit on it. But, for me, it was much more about this kind of kind of playground to get excited about. And from there, I started going to a few meetups, went to a few, trade shows kind of thing, just to find out more about it. And especially when, CBOE and then CME started listing futures on it, I was like, wow, this isn't just going to go away overnight now. This has obviously got a little bit more, meat behind it. And so from there, I, again, went to a few places trying to, I didn't actually search for a job, so to speak, but in talking to the guys at the old Eris business, and them explaining what they were going to do, I thought, hey, maybe now's a great time. And that was beginning of 2018.
Wow, your brother was very much ahead of the curve. That was in 2013. He was accepting Bitcoin for beer.
Yeah. So
he could have taken the price of one beer and just held on to that Bitcoin and sold the bar eventually.
Yeah. He unfortunately, he didn't really hold it either. So he had a couple of holidays, but that was all right.
He was well ahead of the curve, certainly on the trading crypto for alcohol front, which will probably be a booming trade in the near future. But you mentioned kind of what you guys are doing over there at ErisX, but obviously a lot has happened, a lot has popped off since the last time we caught up with Matt and you guys over a year ago. So catch us up. You mentioned some of your work with the intermediaries over there, like Fidelity and, of course, TD. What have you guys been bringing online with those guys since the last time we chatted?
Like I said, I mean, obviously those businesses have got their own avenues into, providing crypto to their clients, and things like that. So, however they want to sell it to their customers, obviously, there's different approaches. TradeStation, as you would know, has got their TradeStation crypto platform, which is, humming away. And we're lucky enough to be one of the, essentially one of the liquidity providers to that platform, I guess you could describe it as, or essentially, they execute into our platform when they need to. So, and those businesses obviously are, very different from an exchange or a clearinghouse like we are. They're, they are that intermediary who provide their customers with much more, rounded, services, whether it's research, whether it's education, whether it's, just access to, multiple instruments on the same platform and things like that. So, those guys are both charging ahead with their different plans and how they're going to grow those businesses. And we're lucky enough that, they invested in us a couple of years ago now. And so we've been a very close, partner with them and helping them get those businesses up and running wherever we can. They've also helped us. And as I said, now routing order flow to our platform. So definitely a really cool adventure.
It must have been difficult for you guys over the last year or so. As obviously one of the big investors and early proponents of your platform was, of course, the TD folks. They, for the better part of the last year or so, have been tied up with this merger/acquisition deal with Charles Schwab, which pretty much just got approval not too long ago. But obviously, whenever there's a merger lurking on the horizon, it always gums up the works for new initiatives and new products. How have you guys been able to deal with that and kind of the uncertainty going forward as you're trying to build out this platform with TD there, Ian?
Yeah, so, not TD specific, but I think, the way the US market is growing and building, definitely there's a lot more, view that, regulated markets are the right direction, so, we obviously took that approach early on, and a number of other platforms out there, are doing their best to be regulated in whichever capacity they need, and so, the traditional money transmitter licenses that a number of venues have operated on, as well as, of course, the New York BIT license, get you so far. But for our business, us being regulated by the CFTC, so we can have a, fully compliant futures business, and offering the futures on the crypto is part of that avenue. And the reason to bring that up is kind of to then roll it back into, these intermediaries who may be regulated in different ways. They may be regulated under, banking licenses. They may be regulated under broker-dealer and SEC kind of thresholds. And then, or maybe they're FCMs under the CFTC. And again, the reason to bring that up is I would say the traditional intermediaries, have got certain, regulatory, areas that they have to be able to satisfy. And right now, they're trying to work through those hoops to get past that regulation and let people be comfortable with, accessing crypto and accessing, other digital markets. So TradeStation, as you know, they're a traditional FCM as well and have that business. TradeStation Crypto is one where, they've looked at it a little differently. Same with Fidelity with their trust license now in New York. They're obviously, they've got themselves regulated from a crypto perspective in a specific way, so they know they can tackle the business. So trying to bring in these other intermediaries, it's a case of trying to work with them on that regulation, help them understand what they may need to do, what they need to think about, and then moving them through into that ecosystem, so that they can start interacting with our fully regulated platform.
Yeah, we had the TradeStation crypto guys on this program not too long ago, and you're right, it is kind of interesting to see the various legal and regulatory hoops they have to jump through to make this entity, because effectively TradeStation Crypto, effectively a separate entity, even though it has the TradeStation name attached to it. We talked about how if you want to trade the options on the crypto, you actually still have to go through the TradeStation parent, so it's a little bit confusing where the lines are there, but that's kind of the world we find ourselves in the crypto space right now. One of the interesting things, Ian, that you guys at ErisX were kind of early proponents of was the addition of the physically settled contracts into the crypto world. A lot of people were talking about this for a long time. That was going to be the thing that really paved the way for a lot of big players, whether the traditional, Bitcoin holders or the institutional folks. That was going to be the on-ramp for a lot of them who have these big positions or want to establish big positions, and they want to use a physically settled contract to either hedge them or to get out of them or to get into them. That was going to be the launching point. Like I said, you guys were very early on that debate. We also saw the folks at BAKKT and others really pushing hard on this physically settled type contract spectrum. Now, fast forward a couple of years, BAKKT is out. I don't want to spoil it, but we'll get to it a little bit later. They've raised a ton of money, but their contracts have really kind of been a whimper in terms of interest in them over there. And we've actually started to hear from some of the guests on this network over the past few months that maybe physically settled is a little bit too much of a headache for some of the institutional players. They don't want to deal with that delivery aspect. They want to just have the old traditional cash settled, and maybe that's an easier on-ramp for institutional players. So it seems like there might have been some pushback of late against the physically settled contracts. I'm curious, what do you guys feel about that? And what are you hearing from the institutional players that you engage with? Do you think there still is a large demand for the physically settled contracts despite the recent entrances of players like BAKKT and then not really finding a lot of footing?
Oh, okay, sure. I think there is room for both still. I agree. BAKKT hasn't obviously, had the success that the CME have had with their financially settled contract. I think the benefit you have from a financially settled contract is, just the workflows are obviously much simpler. You get exposure to an asset class, whether that's, a view, a long view or a short view. And then you can either realize that P&L, close out that position, take it to expiry, and whatever, you get you realize your P&L, at some point in just dollars, and that is definitely a great workflow for regulated entities. So, the physically delivered physically delivered futures that we have, and obviously BAKKT is different to ours. They definitely still have a place, but I think what's finding it hard in the US right now is still, who are the entities that actually can take delivery, actually hold the coins on their balance sheet as an asset, which are really the funds, but definitely not the FCMs right now. So we're working towards, getting those people on board and helping them with that understanding. But I think there's still a big appetite for physically delivered futures to help people in the industry, the mining community, the users of Ether as the underlying, gas, the power that, fuels the, smart contracts on Ether and things like that on the Ethereum platform. I think so. There is definitely a room for both, but I think it's still so early, and people are still trying to understand what these products mean, how they help them with their cash flows, or how they help them with their, portfolio and things like that. And because, CME's contract is very, easy on-ramp with dollars, I think that's why a lot of that flow has gone over there. Now, our contracts, because they operate a little differently, in that they're fully funded as well, it means that you have to use crypto to actually collateralize, some of your position. And that's actually quite beneficial to the people who want to use it, i.e. they can use these coins as their collateral to enter into futures positions. But with that means that they really need to be direct members. And although you can become a direct member of the CME and I think ICE, the cost of actually becoming a direct member of either one of those institutions means that you actually have to contribute to the guarantee fund, Well, at ErisX, you can become a direct member, an individual if you want to, and trade futures on our platform. So, everybody's trying to find the sweet spot of, what works. And, as we grow and our platform grows, more and more customers are coming on every day to trade physical futures.
You mentioned, the CME, and you're right, even they, the 800-pound gorilla in the derivative space, have struggled until very recently, actually, to find traction on the crypto space. The futures have done a fairly robust growth, kind of plateaued a little bit of late, but still have done decent paper. But on the options front, they really struggled until the past few weeks. And spoiler alert, we're going to get to more of that in a little bit, listeners, when we break down all of the crypto options and derivatives volume that's going on in the Bitcoin breakdown in a little bit. But until the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden we've seen them starting to come alive. I'm not sure if it's just the lingering effect of the halving or something else that has driven more clients and more customers to start trading the options on CME. But even for them, with these cash settled instruments and, the legacy platform and reach that they have in the space, it took a long time for the options to really start generating a little bit of momentum out there. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier because it kind of piqued my curiosity. You mentioned Ether. Ether is obviously the number 2 overall cryptocurrency out there. And you guys have an interesting contract you offer out there, which is your ETH Bitcoin peer future. Walk us through why you decided to launch that. And obviously we've seen a little bit of an uptick in interest in Ether of late. What have you guys been seeing on that peer future front of late, Ian?
Well, I think here's the thing, right? We, super excited to be the first that list Ether. And, if you're gonna tackle the crypto space, you might as well do it, as well as you can. So, when we wanted to list the Ether contract, and we already had our spot platform with the Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin on it, as well as the 3 against Bitcoin as well. I was like, well, why wouldn't we list an ETH Bitcoin future? There's an avenue there where people either with Bitcoin or with Ether want to switch between the two. And for those that may have either funds and positions who want to, understand both of those assets, but may want to switch between them, maybe they want some price certainty, maybe they want to hedge, whatever it may be. I was like, well, we should definitely list an ETH Bitcoin future at the same time. There was definitely a good conversation with the CFTC to, help them understand what did it mean. But not a very long conversation because it's really pretty simple. Instead of pricing ETH in dollars, you price it in Bitcoin. And then you wrap it up with a future so that people can have some exposure to, kind of a price curve, so to speak, of that pair, and the relationship of that pair over some time. So, we're still small, we're still growing, and so it's some education is still needed to help people understand, more the future side of it, less than the spot side. But definitely wanted to be, why not have 2 first? Why just 1?
Yeah, I like that mentality. Now, you've touched on regulation a few times. It's kind of unfortunately the flip side of the crypto coin. You can't really talk one here in the U.S. without talking about the other. We've talked about it a lot here on this program over the past year and change. We've had SEC commissioners and others on here to discuss it directly as you guys are out there listing new products and new contracts and engaging with the regulators on a regular basis. Obviously, these are challenging times for anything going on in D.C. because there's other agendas at play, like the global pandemic, of course, and other issues that have to be dealt with first. Probably a challenging time to get new things approved. But I'm curious, in general, are you starting to see perhaps more interest in this space from the regulators, whether it's the CFTC or the SEC or both? And do you see the outlook as maybe getting a little bit more open from a crypto regulation perspective here in the U.S., or is it still difficult to get new products issued and approved there, Ian?
How do I answer that question? I think the thing is, right, why do we have regulation? Customer protection, fraud, manipulation, you've got to accept that we in the US and obviously, in Europe and a number of other countries have gone down the regulated path with our, capital markets because it's the right thing to do. Now, obviously, some people take an opposite approach and think, let people almost do what they want. But I think the customer protection has helped build capital markets in the US and in Europe, tremendously, and even in Asia, right? So I think the way we approached it and making sure that we follow the regulatory approach to build a marketplace is still the right thing. And does that make it any easier? Well, no, there's a lot more to do. Does it make it wrong? Definitely not. And I think as we as we work with the CFTC, at other products and launching things, it's not that they're not informed, and it's not that they don't know what they're doing at all. In fact, most of the time when we're talking to them about things, they are, they've definitely done their homework. They've known about this for a while. They're on top of these things. And so it's less about them not wanting the US to, have access to these products. And it's them taking their responsibility, seriously, to make sure that the products that are being released are going to be either beneficial to the marketplace, not just, thrown out there so people can gamble on them, so to speak, and so, no, we don't have any problems working with the CFTC. It's a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's both of us understanding what the other, needs to look at so that we can, either get products approved or things like that. So, I wouldn't say, difficult to say whether it's opening up. It's more a case of maybe people are understanding the regulation more, and that means that the people are embracing it and working with it better.
Well, understanding, always a good thing. We can get behind that. We talked a lot about interesting developments on the futures front, but the name is the Options Insider Radio Network, Ian, so I am legally obligated at some point to ask you about crypto options. As I just mentioned, we've seen a bit of a resurgence, a spark of interest in the big contracts over there at CME and others. When do you think, give us some sort of hope, some sort of ray of sunshine here, Ian, that they can cling to for when you think we might start seeing options over there on ErisX, sir?
We have a pretty hefty roadmap of a few other things that we're looking at adding and building over the next 6 months into next year. I'd love to be able to say I could give you a time and a date, but unfortunately I can't do that right now. So it's definitely something we will want to add in the future, but right now it's behind a couple of other things that we're focused on.
Well, Ian, I'm glad we can get you here to join us on the Crypto Hot Seat. Hopefully it wasn't too uncomfortable for you. We have to keep rolling with the rest of the program. But before we do that, if you want to leave our audience with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease, obviously, sadly, listeners, doesn't sound like it's going to be the options. But if you want to leave our listeners with any other hint, any other tease of what you guys have up your sleeve over there at ErisX, now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, look, we launched, as mentioned, we launched our, Ether contracts a couple of months ago or a month ago. We also launched a block trading platform allowing customers to negotiate either spot or futures contracts in a block-like, workflow. And instead of having to go through the whole complexities of escrow and customer onboarding and things like that, this allows customers to literally, do a block trade with anyone else on our platform who's eligible. So that's a really cool service available via our trading interface and our API. And we are working very closely to launch another futures contract in the next, not too distant future. So hopefully the listeners will keep an ear out, and we can come back soon and kind of announce that and talk to you about it.
And if folks are intrigued by all of that, they want to learn more, where should they go? What should they do, Ian?
Yeah, you can, you can follow us on Twitter, go to our website, erisx.com, and, keep an eye out for the news. We've been pretty active in the marketing space the last 6 months. So I know our head of marketing has a number of other programs to put out there, as well as some, great content. So yes, go to our website, sign up for newsletter, sign up for, sign up for our, go to our Twitter and follow us, basically.
There you go. Hit the man up over there. Find him on Twitter. Find him on ErisX.com. Let him know if you want the options as well, so you could force them to bump that ahead to the top of their roadmap. Well, Ian, I'm glad you could join us on these crazy, tumultuous times in the market here. We'll have to check back in with you guys in the near future to see how all these different initiatives, how they unfold in the marketplace in the coming months.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it.
And we have to keep on rolling right on into our next segment. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do exactly what the man says. We break down what the heck's going on in the world's leading cryptocurrency market from an overall spot perspective, but also the options, the volume, the futures, the SKEW, all that good stuff, the volatility. Coming into showtime, we're seeing Bitcoin hovering right around a 94.10 or so. That puts it down, 316 handles from where it was this time last week. Well, let's dive on into the analytics. Most of these coming at you courtesy of our friends over there in SKEW land, SKEW.com. And some interesting stuff to parse here. Let's start in the realized landscape. And the realized coming in a little bit. So the movements on Bitcoin, not quite as aggressive as they were a few weeks ago. It's still pretty active. Realized vol 30 days, about a 62%. That puts it down about 10% from last week. 1 year, still pretty much unched, right around the 89% level. 30-day implied, also interestingly enough, almost exactly unched. I think it was 64% last week. It's 65% this week. So not a lot going on in the implied vol space, which means, of course, that Bitcoin listeners is moving enough to maintain that current level of vol. Interesting nuggets shared by our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. They were, of course, on the show not too long ago, chiming in that about a year ago, a little bit of historical perspective. A year ago, Bitcoin implied vol was about 71%, and VIX was at 15%. Oh, how the worm has turned. Now, when they put this out a few days ago, at the time, Bitcoin vol was 62%, and the VIX was 36%. So a little bit different how things have changed over the course of the past year out there. I encourage you, if you haven't done so, check out their newsletter they put out every week. Go sign up for it. You find some nuggets like this, looking at overall SKEW and volatility levels out there. And they're looking at SKEWs pretty much over the next few months, showing how they're pretty much symmetrical. Calls to puts out there. And that's pretty much what we're seeing out there as well when we start breaking down the SKEW in a little bit. In fact, let's do that now. Let's jump to that. It's pretty much back to a coin flip, though it has moved pretty aggressively over the course of the past few weeks. 2 weeks ago, the SKEW was about negative 5%. Then it was kind of unched 0.4%. It's up to about a 9.4% now up there in the 25 Delta call, 25 Delta put out there. Let's see what's lighting it up from an overall volume perspective. Let's start on the volume leader, which is Deribit, and a lighter volume week than last week, but still a pretty active week out there. 169 million was the big day still recently. That was back on the 2nd of June. Couldn't quite match that over the past week, but still some active days. 125 million. Again, this is notional. You know, I hate that, but that's still the way it's quoted for now. 125 million worth of notional on the 11th, 120 million on the 9th, and today looks like a pretty active day as well. Coming into showtime, there was already about 90 million worth of notional on the tape, so it seems like today's going to be a pretty active day as well. The big prints out there over the past week looks like some verticals. In particular, back on the 9th, it was a June 11,000, 13,000 vertical going up 500 times, one of the bigger prints. Also followed by, looks like a June 8,000 puts, just straight up. Paper like on those back on the 14th. So yesterday, about 1,000 times, 500 lots. The puts went up when Bitcoin was about 93.33. The vertical went up when Bitcoin was 97.08. So those are kind of the bigger prints we saw on the week. Also worth noting, on that same day, the 14th, it's like about 250 of the 7,500 puts went up. So maybe a bit of a funky ratio roll there. We don't have the sides on all this, so it's kind of hard to intuit out there. Today, again, a pretty active day. The big prints on Deribit are the 8,500 puts again, with almost about 550 on the tape and 535 of the 7,500 puts. So those are clearly where the action is. Maybe showing some folks a little bit concerned, want to pick up some downside. Maybe they're taking them off. Either way, pretty active. Let's go on out to CME land on the options front. Like I mentioned when we were talking with Ian from ErisX there, CME options have kind of roared to life over the past few weeks, really. Prior to the halving, CME was kind of a de minimis factor when it came to overall OI on the options front. These days, not so much. In fact, the big print, again, SKEW showing 2,500 of this 10,800, 14,000 vertical. I do believe that's 5x, though. I do believe they multiply that to make it line up with some of their other notional contracts. So I do believe that's really just a 500. I'll have to dig in to be precise. But we've seen that in the past. We've seen the SKEW numbers are inflated compared to the actual volume that's going up on CME. And I do believe they do that to keep the notional quantities in line. Remember, that's a 5x contract over there on the CME versus what ErisX has. We didn't even get a chance to get to the contract specs with them. They're a 10th size contract. So kind of a range of sizes out there right now for you guys in the crypto space. If you want a 1/10 size, ErisX got you covered. If you want 5x Bitcoin, that's a meaty contract. CME got you covered. And again, about 500 of the 10,800, 14,000. It's been a lot of verticals of late out here in the options land. For whatever reason, it's not really just the SKEW. The SKEW hasn't moved that much where you might want to dive into the call side because it's all mostly call verticals. But for whatever reason, call verticals dominating the tape out there a lot on Deribit and on CME. We talked about the SKEW out there. Call to put, strangely unched from what it was. It was on 42% last week, and it's about 42% this week. So puts ever so slightly leading the dance, but not a ton. We mentioned before how CME is kind of coming back online. That continues this week from an overall open interest perspective. Deribit still the number one big dog out there with about exactly 1 billion, 1.0 exactly actually, in open interest out there right now. But CME, hot on their heels right now with 357 million worth of open interest. Then we've got OKEX and LedgerX slugging it out for third with 57 million at OKEX, 51 million at LedgerX, and then BAKKT, like we mentioned, still at a paltry 65,000. That hasn't changed in months. So the options, for whatever reason, not gaining traction over there. Maybe it's a physically settled issue that we discussed with Ian earlier. Maybe it's something else, but for whatever reason, the options over there on BAKKT land just not generating any real excitement out there right now. All right, let's go on over to, let's look at the OI really quickly because it has been growing for CME. Just 3 weeks ago, CME was anemic. They were non-existent from an options open interest perspective. 2 weeks ago, they jumped up to 14%, 21% last week. This week, they're at 24% of total outstanding options open interest. Deribit below 70 now, 69%. A lot of that coming from CME. Then we've got OKEX and LedgerX with 4% and 3% respectively. And BAKKT, like we said, not really a lot popping off. Let's look at where the OI is aggregated. It's still June. June continues to grow and dominating the tape. 101,000 contracts open in June right now. For whatever reason, all these verticals, everything else, it's all going up in June. I don't know what the fixation is with these quarterlies, but that's the way the paper goes up in the Bitcoin space. Then once June goes off the board, it's going to roll right on out to SEP, and it's going to be the same deal. It was the same thing in March, was the same thing in DECE and everything else. That's just the way these contracts work. It's interesting, but c'est la vie. That's kind of how these contracts roll, and we've seen the same thing. OI just continues to build and grow in June. In terms of a strike OI, it used to be, not too long ago, it was 7,000 and 10,000 were the big dogs. Now it's changed. It's 11,000, probably because of some of those verticals. 11,000 taking the front row seat here with about 13,000 contracts open there. And then it's kind of a hot race for number two with 12,000 at 10,900. And then we've got 13,000 actually at about 10,000. Actually, I'm sorry, it looks like 14,000. This graph's the legend a little bit indecipherable here, but looks like about 10,500 actually for 14,000, and then 10,300 for the 10,000 strike. So weird strikes overall. 10,000 makes sense because we're threatening that right now. 11,000 maybe, but you're getting up to 14,000 and beyond. So 7,000 has fallen off the radar. Only about 7,900 contracts open there right now. Let's get out to the futures. We're just talking futures with Ian and the folks from ErisX. Light volume this week on the CME Bitcoin futures front. Only about 6,300 contracts on the tape today. The busiest day last week was Thursday with about 12,000. Every other day was about 7,600 or less out there. Out to the BAKKT volume bot, our old friend who likes to keep an eye on all things BAKKT. And not a lot going on out there. Total volume, about 73 million worth of notional. That's in their monthly futures. The futures do decent volume on BAKKT, but the options not so much. That's still, though, at 73 million, that's off 34%. And the max open interest is kind of unched out there. Let's keep on rolling. We're coming up against it, but let's get on to explore a little bit of the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, listeners, let's head on out to the altcoin universe where we explore what's going on outside of Bitcoin. Most of the oxygen in the room taken up by Bitcoin, obviously, but a little bit of fun to be had in the rest of the altcoins. Let's break down the top 10 really quickly because this has been changing of late out there. Number 10, let's go from the bottom to the top this time. Number 10, Cardano. Again, market caps, take these with a huge grain of salt, but the rankings, I think, are pretty reliable. Cardano, number 10, 2.2 billion. Number 9, EOS, 2.6 billion. Number 8, Binance Coin, 2.7 billion. Number 7, Litecoin. It's been kind of locked at 7 for a while. Almost 3 billion exactly. Number 6, Bitcoin SV, 3.5 billion. Number 5, Bitcoin Cash, 4.6 billion. Number 4, our old friend XRP bumped down to number 4. Oh, the ignominy. Oh, how the mighty have fallen at about 8.9 billion. Number 3, Tether, just inching them out again this week at about 9.2 billion. Number 2, of course, ETH at about 27 billion. That puts number 1, once again, the monster that is Bitcoin at 179 billion worth of market cap. Let's dive on out to ETH. Again, these analytics coming at you courtesy from our friends over there in SKEW land, SKEW.com, a great place to go. While it's still free, listeners, take advantage of it if you're interested in SKEW and volume and volatility and all this good stuff, the most active trades, all that good stuff. SKEW.com, a great place to go. Coming into today's show, ETH, like we mentioned with Ian, ETH has been seeing a little bit of resurgence of late. A lot of things going on behind the scenes in ETH land. It's actually driving some price action as well. ETH's up about 4.25 points from last show, so a nice little rally out there in ETH land. It has given some of that back now, though, since we started the show. It was up at 243. Now it looks like coming to showtime, it's at about a 232. So interesting stuff. Actually, that puts it down a little bit from last show, 6 handles. So a bit of a swing of late out here in all things ETH. Interesting stuff. Let's move on out to see if that's reflected in the vol and the volume out here. 30-day realized vol coming off a little bit similar to what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin land. 30-day realized is at about a 74%. That's down from 80% a week ago. 1 year realized unched at a still impressive 106%. In fact, the folks at Genesis Vol were tweeting out about this just last week, saying how ETH Vol and Bitcoin Vol are now still trading at very similar levels, and that might be an interesting opportunity, at least according to them, saying considering the historical differences in their vol. So those two, ETH and Bitcoin, don't usually hang out at the same vol levels for very long. So now that they are, might make it interesting talking about those Bitcoin Ether peers futures earlier. If you are so inclined, the vol levels at similar levels right now from an ETH and from a Bitcoin perspective probably won't hang out that way for too long. The implied right now in ETH is at about a 70%. That's effectively unched from last week, ticked up a little bit. It was 68% this time last week for 1 month 1 month implied out there. The ADV also up strong. Like we said, there's been a decent resurgence in ETH options volume. It was 7.5 million worth of notional last show. Now it's up to 10 million. The biggest spike we've seen of late was 30 million worth of notional on the first. Today, again, a pretty active day out there in ETH land, probably as a result of this sell-off, is 19 million coming into showtime. That's probably more now. I'm sure if I go in and hit refresh right now, I'll probably see that number a little bit higher out there. So today's movement in ETH probably driving a little bit of action. The SKEW out there has also moved quite a bit. It was minus 8.2%. Now it's up to a positive swing up there, about 2.6% on the positive side. Again, these SKEW numbers sometimes they can be a little bit counterintuitive for people to digest. I encourage you, if you're confused by all that, go check out the episode we did with the SKEW folks not that long ago, a few months ago, where we break down kind of what all these numbers mean and their certain nomenclature. It's a little bit different than perhaps you might expect. OI also strong, effectively doubling from not too long ago out there in ETH land. It was 73 million not too long ago. Now it's coming into showtime. The open interest on the options front was 144 million. So again, that kind of just shows ever since, even over the last month, it was around 50 million in OI. So ETH options have really kind of come on and come into their own just in the past month or so. So a lot of interesting stuff on ETH land. Have to keep an eye on that. Maybe bring on some more ETH-oriented guests in the show in the coming months to kind of break down what the heck's going on out there and how that's driving so much price action and indeed so much volatility and volume. Not so much on the Ripple front. Ripple effectively unched 0.001. It's still hovering around that 19 cent level as it was from last show. Bitcoin Cash up a wee bit, up about 10 handles from last show, and Bitcoin SV shedding a little bit, off about 3.5 points from last show. But we can't let the show go without getting some of you guys on board. Without further ado, a real quick trip to answer some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, let's see what we got here. First up, frequent questioner. Mr. Scott Somer out there chiming in. He sent a link to someone's poll where they were asking what is the best cryptocurrency exchange, and they gave 4 choices: Coinbase, Binance, Gemini, or other. And then he wanted to know what we thought the answers would be if we ran this poll on our crypto show. That's a good question, Scott, and we probably would have to tweak it a little bit. This kind of gets to the weird, nebulous definition of what an exchange is in the crypto world versus what it is in the traditional financial world. 'Cause a lot of these venues that are listed, like Coinbase and Gemini and Binance, they're much more in the in the retail broker side of the space than they really are an exchange. Gemini are a little bit different because they obviously have products and things too, and now Binance does as well. But Coinbase very much effectively a broker. A CME, obviously a different venue. They're not out there getting customers and acquiring customers the way a broker is. But they have the product sides. It's very nebulous. So you probably would have to change this a little bit. Probably would mix it up. Probably have to throw CME in there because they're doing a lot of paper right now. Obviously have to put Deribit on there as well. And then maybe we have to have two polls. One for like the actual quote-unquote exchanges, and then maybe the front-end portals, the brokers, like the Coinbases, the Krakens, and others. It might be two separate polls. And then we have to, of course, skew it, pun intended, towards the options and derivatives side. So maybe throwing on an ErisX and a few others, whereas Coinbase and Binance does now. They have the options, obviously, but Coinbase doesn't really play in the derivative side too much. So we probably have to change that poll up, but it's a good question. It might be worth considering for a future episode there, Scott, how we would do that poll to make it make sense for our audience, which venues to include, how to parse it. It's hard to squeeze all that into 4 choices, but it might be an interesting one, so that's a good suggestion out there. And let's wrap it up here with this question from Nicholas, who wants to know, can you trade spreads like iron condors and similar in Bitcoin options? And, well, the short answer is yes. Anything that has a listed option contract on it, Nicholas, you can do spreads. It is a theoretically possible. The question is, logistically and practically, is it really an easy thing to do? Like, for example, Bitcoin is getting there. I mentioned some of the big prints going up this past week, but still not the most liquid, easily accessible, tight spread product out there. So if you want to trade a multi-leg strategy, and an iron condor, listeners, is effectively 2 strangles outside of the at-the-money, or you can think of it as a put spread and a call spread away from the at-the-money, however you want to look at it. Either way, it's 4 legs. So it's it's a pretty intimidating thing to do in a liquid name like an Apple or a SPY. You're getting outside of that into Bitcoin options. Practically, it's probably going to be pretty hard to get a reliable market on that and to do any decent size without just killing yourself in a spread perspective. And also, the quote-unquote brokers out there who are providing the front-end access to this thing aren't the most option-savvy yet. So it's an open question. Well, they will allow you to come in and quote an iron condor, or whether you have to, are they going to have it in their drop-down like most big retail brokers do on the options front now? You have to populate it yourself, add a leg here, add a leg there, add a leg there, and then quote that. So it's probably going to be pretty laborious, and the spreads are probably going to be pretty wide. But if that doesn't deter you, then I suppose, yes, technically it is theoretically possible. We're not really there yet from being able to do a lot of the strategies easily and with a decent amount of liquidity that you can in some of the more active equity and index options that we're seeing on the traditional finance front. At least not yet. Getting there, but not quite there yet, Nicholas. All right. Unfortunately, listeners, that music means we've come to the end of yet another epic journey through the world of all things crypto. I want to thank our guest, Ian, there from ErisX. Check them out, erisx.com. If you want to learn more, kick the tires over there on their futures. Hopefully someday in the near future, options. If you want to see options, go hit them up. Let them know. That way it's not just me bugging them. It's all of you guys out there as well. Of course, they have to see some volume on their underlyings first before they get to options. So I understand why they're a little bit reticent to dive into that pool, but hopefully sometime in the near future out there. Well, we got Andrew chiming in the live chat saying, yes, block trades are available on Deribit. I believe you must be referring to that last question from Nicholas. So, yeah, if he wants to put it up in a size block, you can get anything you want. You can call up, a market-making firm like we used to have the folks over here on Akuna. They will quote that for you, OTC. Yes, so you can do that in size and put it up in a block on Deribit. I'm assuming he means more of a retail 10-lot friendly size, which is a little bit of a different transaction. Even still, if you're putting it up OTC, it's going to be pretty wide. So, yeah, I'm with you. I want to see these prints going up, and technically the ability is there. But I think from a retail-friendly, certainly, and even for a lot of large institutions, the spreads just still aren't there where they're friendly enough to be trading in and out multi-leg things like iron condors. But hopefully sometime in the near future. Again, I want to thank our guest, Ian, joining us from ErisX. Check them out, erisx.com. I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in such great questions. Keep them coming. We love all you guys out there. Stay safe, We'll be back again soon this week for a lot of content hitting the network this week. Of course, have a lot more live streams going up on the network as well for you guys to enjoy in between those broadcasts. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our full podcast network so you're not missing out on any shows. It's available everywhere, including on YouTube now. So a lot of you guys like it on YouTube. You can get it there as well. Keep those questions coming. We love to hear from you. If you like what you hear, leave a review on your platform of choice. That's helping new people continue to discover the network in these challenging times. That's more important than ever for those folks out there. Help them discover it. Leave a review out there. And we'll see you back here next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.